I met Lily when I wasn't even looking. Back then, life was all momentum. My best friend Dylan and I had just finished setting up our own electrical goods store, a real gamble we poured everything into, and between the endless late nights, the supplier meetings, the logo redesigns, and the grand opening buzz, I didn't exactly have much time for dating. But somehow, there she was. We met at a weekend farmer's market, of all places. She was running a pop-up booth for her cousin's handmade soaps. I was there because my mom dragged me out, claiming I needed sunlight and vegetables before I turned into an actual goblin. Lily had this easy way about her. She wasn't trying too hard, wasn't playing games, wasn't trying to fit into any particular mold. She was funny without being sharp, sweet without being saccharine. She made me laugh so hard I nearly dropped a whole carton of tomatoes at her feet. We talked for nearly an hour, ignoring the way people shuffled around us, and by the time my mom was done shopping, Lily had already slipped her number into my jacket pocket with a wink. Our first date was a mix of nerves and comfort. Dinner, late coffee, a walk under strings of lights that the town put up every winter whether it snowed or not. I remember thinking halfway through the evening that she was different. Real. The kind of person who looked you right in the eye when you talked and actually listened. It didn't take long for things to get serious. She was there through the store's first real hard season, when the excitement wore off and the work settled into something slower, steadier. She never once complained about the long hours Dylan and I kept. She brought dinners by the shop sometimes, staying late to keep me company while I tallied up invoices or tried to fix displays that never quite stayed lit the way I wanted them to. A year after we met, I proposed. Nothing fancy. Just me, her, and a sunset over the hilltop where we used to walk the dog she convinced me to adopt. She said yes through tears and laughter and about 10 different half-sentences, and we were married the following spring. We bought a house a few blocks from the shop. Big open windows, a sturdy porch swing Lily picked out herself, a backyard just messy enough to feel lived in without feeling forgotten. It was the kind of house you picture in your head when you think about building a life. And that's exactly what we did. Lily started a part-time job at a local design firm, managing websites, doing layouts, setting up ads for small businesses around town. She loved the creativity. I loved seeing her light up when a client called just to say thanks. We talked about maybe starting a family soon. We even started looking at vacation spots for a real trip, something we hadn't had time for since opening the store. Money was steady. The shop was steady. The marriage was steady. Lily fit into every part of my world like she'd always been meant to be there. She wasn't just good with me, she was good with everyone. My family loved her almost instantly. My mom called her the daughter she never had after just one Thanksgiving. My dad, who had only ever trusted 2 people in his life, my mom and Dylan, trusted Lily like she'd been part of the family since the beginning. Even Dylan, who was usually slow to warm up to new people, treated her like a sister before long. We had plenty of evenings where the 3 of us ended up sitting out on the back deck, beers in hand, swapping stories until the stars came out. Our routine settled into place almost without thinking about it. Mornings meant a quick coffee in the kitchen together, even on the busiest days. Sunday nights were reserved for dinners at home, no phones, no distractions, just good food and long conversations that usually ended with us laughing until we couldn't breathe. There were weekends where we'd pack up the car and drive out into the hills just to get away for a few hours, taking the dog with us and pretending we were the adventurous type, even though we usually ended up finding a picnic spot within a half-mile of the parking lot. Business at the shop was good too. Dylan and I balanced each other well. He handled a lot of the technical repairs, while I focused on customer service and partnerships. We had a solid rhythm, the kind that made hard work feel easy most days. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We could afford little weekend trips, nice birthday dinners, the occasional splurge on something for the house without stressing over the cost. Lily supported everything we were building without ever making it about her. She celebrated every small success, every new contract we landed. When we updated the storefront and held a little reopening party, she was the one who stayed late the night before, helping us scrub the windows and hang the new signage just right. There were talks of expanding, maybe opening a second location someday, if things kept going well. It wasn't just a dream anymore. It felt possible. Tangible. At home, things stayed easy. Sure, we had little arguments sometimes, about who forgot to put the trash out, or whose turn it was to fold the laundry. But nothing that ever stuck. Nothing that left a mark. If anything, those moments just reminded me how lucky we were. It's easy to take comfort for granted when it feels natural. When you're used to having someone meet you halfway without having to ask. Even on the busiest days, when I came home exhausted, there was always a plate in the fridge, a note on the counter, a kiss before bed that reset the whole world back to where it belonged. It was the kind of life you hope for but don't really expect to find. And somehow, we had built it without even realizing we were doing it. Sunday mornings had their own rhythm in our house. The kind that didn't need alarms or schedules. Lily loved waking up slow, pulling on one of my sweatshirts, making coffee while the dog circled her feet waiting for scraps. I usually handled breakfast, eggs, bacon, toast, simple things we could eat out on the porch while the sun still felt soft. Sometimes Dylan would swing by after a heavy week at the store. We'd sit on the porch, beers in hand even if it was barely noon, talking about business, laughing about customers who didn't know the difference between a blender and a coffee grinder. Lily fit right into it, joking along with us, tossing the ball for Ava while she listened in on our half-planned business ideas. Everything we built felt steady. The store was hitting its stride. More repeat customers. More people recommending us to friends and family. We started talking about offering installations as part of our service, maybe hiring a few extra hands next year if growth kept up the way it was. At home, life was just as good. Lily had a knack for making even ordinary evenings feel special. She would light candles even if we were just eating pizza. She would put on old records in the background while we worked on separate things at the kitchen table, me hammering out inventory spreadsheets, her sketching layouts or reviewing designs for her clients. Our house stayed warm and open. There were always fresh flowers on the table, even in winter. Always a few throw blankets draped over chairs, not for show, but because Lily liked the feeling of being able to wrap herself up wherever she landed. She made everything feel easy. We took weekend trips sometimes. Nothing far, just driving up the coast, finding little beach towns where the shops closed early and the diners stayed open late. We always brought Ava, who loved sticking her head out the car window, catching every smell between here and the next town over. Even busy days didn't weigh us down. There was always time for a quick kiss in the morning, a stupid joke text in the middle of the afternoon, a movie night thrown together at the last second. We weren't racing toward anything. We were just living it. Lily talked about wanting to expand the garden in the spring, more tomatoes, some wildflowers along the back fence. I told her I'd build her a proper raised bed this time instead of the half-dug disaster we threw together last year. She laughed and made me swear on it. It was easy to picture more summers just like that, slow and a little messy, but ours. At the shop, Dylan and I started getting serious about the expansion idea. We weren't moving fast, just laying the groundwork, talking to suppliers, looking at some empty storefronts across town. Lily encouraged us without pushing. She was always good at knowing when to let us figure things out on our own. It was the kind of life people hope to build when they first sit down and sketch out dreams on the back of napkins. And we had it. Not by accident. By building it, piece by piece, together. By the time winter came around, life had settled into a rhythm that felt almost effortless. The holidays brought the usual chaos, decorations tangled in storage bins, last-minute shopping trips, too many cookies filling every surface in the kitchen, but it was the kind of chaos that made the house feel alive. Lily loved decorating for Christmas. Every window got a wreath, every doorway a little string of lights. Even Ava ended up with a festive scarf around her neck, prancing through the living room like she knew she was showing off. We hosted Christmas that year. My parents, Lily's parents, a few cousins who lived close enough to drive in. It was loud and messy and perfect. The kids tore through wrapping paper like tornadoes. The adults barely fit around the dining room table, passing dishes back and forth and laughing so much the windows fogged up. Lily was right in the middle of it all, smiling, refilling glasses, sneaking second helpings onto people's plates when they weren't looking. She thrived when the house was full. I loved seeing her like that, in her element, lighting up the room without even trying. When the new year came, Dylan and I started finalizing plans to bring in new product lines at the store. Smart home systems, upgraded appliances, some custom install packages. It was exciting, seeing our little shop grow into something bigger than we first imagined when we were two broke kids drawing up ideas on bar napkins. Lily stayed supportive through it all. She listened when Dylan and I argued over shelving space, helped brainstorm simple advertising ideas, even suggested we start an online order pickup option, something none of the other local stores were offering yet. We made a good team, at home and in business, even if she wasn't technically part of the company. Weekends stayed sacred. If we weren't working or handling house projects, we were out doing something simple. Driving to a farmer's market, walking Ava at the big park across town, grabbing brunch at a cafe we both liked, where the owner always remembered our names. At night, we slipped back into easy routines. Dinner together. A little TV or reading. Some nights just sitting on the porch in hoodies, watching the stars come out. I built a fire pit in the backyard, a terrible, uneven thing, but Lily loved it. She said it felt like camping without the bugs. The talk about starting a family kept coming up more often now. Light at first, teasing. Then more serious. Budget talks. Room arrangements. Lily even started bookmarking cribs and paint colors on her laptop, showing me with a quiet sort of excitement that didn't need big announcements to feel real. It felt good. Solid. Right. There was nothing rushed about it. No stress. No doubts. Just two people building their future exactly the way they had promised to. When we sat around that fire pit on a chilly night, Ava curled up between us, Lily leaning her head on my shoulder, I remember thinking this was it. Not a finish line, not a prize, but the kind of quiet, strong happiness you work for, and then you live in, day by day. And we were doing it. The first few months of the new year moved fast. Between the new product launches at the shop and some local advertising Dylan and I invested in, business was picking up more than we expected. There were days we barely had time to sit down, but it was the kind of busy you didn't complain about. It meant things were working. It meant all the late nights and early mornings were paying off. Lily stayed just as involved. She helped us design a few flyers, played around with some ideas for a cleaner-looking storefront banner. She even suggested a customer loyalty program that got more people coming back through the door. I made sure to brag about her every chance I got, at the store, with friends, even to my family. I wanted everyone to know that half the best ideas weren't even mine. They were hers. Weekends were a little less free than before, but we still carved out time. Saturday mornings turned into early breakfast runs, grabbing coffee and fresh pastries before heading into the shop for a few hours. Sunday afternoons were for house projects or lazy movie marathons, depending on how much energy we had left. There was a good flow to everything. Natural. Unforced. The same steady beat we built over years of learning how to live beside each other without stepping on toes. Sometimes Dylan would swing by the house, especially if we needed to hash something out without dragging it into a crowded store. Lily always welcomed him, made coffee, laughed at our bickering when we couldn't agree on shelving space or supplier terms. It felt easy, like it always had. But then there were small things, not wrong, not alarming, just different. One afternoon, I stopped by the house after a supply run to grab some paperwork I'd left in the kitchen. Lily wasn't expecting me. When I came through the front door, there was music playing upstairs, not loud, just faint enough to feel like background noise. I called out her name, but there was no answer right away. A few seconds later, she came rushing downstairs, her face a little flushed, like she'd been caught mid-thought. She smiled, tucked a piece of hair behind her ear, and asked if I needed anything. I smiled back. Told her I just needed the papers. She pointed to the counter, kissed me lightly on the cheek, and asked if I wanted her to pack me a quick lunch to go. It was nothing. It felt like nothing. But as I drove back to the shop, I kept thinking about the way she hadn't heard me come in. The way the music covered the sound of the door. The way she seemed just a little too eager to steer the conversation somewhere else. It wasn't fear or anger that settled in my chest. Just a question. One I couldn't quite put into words yet. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was looking for patterns in noise where none existed. By the time I pulled into the shop's parking lot, I had almost talked myself out of it completely. There was no reason to doubt Lily. Not after everything we'd built. I let it go. At least for then. The days kept rolling forward, and on the surface, everything looked the same. Lily was still Lily, warm, funny, thoughtful. She still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still texted me dumb memes during slow hours at the store, still curled up next to me on the couch in the evenings with her head on my shoulder. If anything had changed, it was buried deep enough that even I couldn't point a finger at it. Business was good. Dylan and I had finally hired a part-time helper, a college kid named Kyle who managed deliveries and stocked shelves so we could focus on the bigger stuff. It made the days less hectic, gave me a little more breathing room. Sometimes I used it to get home earlier, surprising Lily with takeout or showing up to knock out house projects we'd put off for months. She was always happy to see me. Always quick with a smile, a hug, an offer to sit down and talk about our days. But now and then, there were small cracks I couldn't unsee once I noticed them. One evening after dinner, Lily asked if I could run to the store for ice cream. Nothing unusual, we had a habit of late-night cravings, and it wasn't the first time she sent me out in sweatpants and a hoodie to track down whatever flavor she'd decided was absolutely necessary for survival. When I got back 20 minutes later, the house was quiet. Too quiet. She wasn't in the kitchen. Not in the living room either. I found her upstairs, sitting on the edge of the bed with her phone tucked into her lap like she hadn't meant to get caught holding it. She smiled easily, like there was nothing strange about it, and reached for the grocery bag without missing a beat. We ended up eating straight from the carton, laughing about the stupid commercials we were half watching. If I hadn't walked up so quietly, I might not have even noticed the way she slid her phone under a pillow before getting up. It wasn't suspicious enough to accuse anyone of anything. Just one of those small, strange moments you don't realize you're filing away until much later. The next weekend, Dylan suggested we close the shop early on Saturday and grab a few beers. It was rare for both of us to be free at the same time, but it sounded good, the kind of simple, familiar thing we didn't get to do often anymore. Lily was supportive as always. She even joked about having the whole couch to herself and threatened to binge-watch a crime show without me. We sat on the patio of a local bar, watching the sun dip behind the buildings, talking about business, about maybe expanding the shop even further next year. But even with the easy conversation and the cold beer in my hand, there was something sitting in the back of my mind now. Something that didn't quite have a name yet. A thread pulled just a little too tight. Not fear. Not jealousy. Just, something. I brushed it aside as best I could. I didn't want to become one of those people, suspicious without cause, inventing problems where none existed. Lily loved me. We had built a life worth trusting. And trust, I kept reminding myself, was something you give before you demand it back. The weeks kept their rhythm. Mornings were rushed but familiar, Lily sipping coffee at the counter while I pulled on boots, the dog weaving between our legs waiting for her walk. Work stayed busy, but it was a good busy. Dylan and I were balancing inventory orders with customer installs, laying the groundwork for what we hoped would be our biggest quarter yet. At home, Lily held everything together like she always had. The house stayed clean, meals appeared when they needed to, Ava got her walks even when we barely had time to blink. Some nights Lily would be curled up on the couch when I got home, half asleep with the TV playing some home improvement show she never intended to finish watching. It should have felt like the same life. And most days, it did. But now and then, there was a pause I didn't know how to explain. A flicker when she asked me how my day was, but didn't seem to hear the answer. A hesitation before she smiled. A distracted look that she shook off too quickly when I asked if something was wrong. Little things. Maybe it was nothing. Stress from the shop bleeding into my brain. Or maybe marriage just settles differently after a few years, when life gets heavier and the excitement wears into something softer. That's what I kept telling myself. Dylan and I had started planning a few adjustments to the shop setup, moving displays around, creating a better customer flow for the spring sales push. Some nights he stayed late after closing, hashing through ideas with me over beers, filling the whiteboard with messy sketches and crossed-out price points. We joked like we always did. Talked about the future like we always had. If there was something different in his laugh, or a strain around the edges of his words, I ignored it. It was easier to pretend everything was fine. One afternoon, Dylan mentioned needing to swing by the house to drop off some documents we'd left in the back office, invoices we needed to review before a big supplier call the next morning. I told him that was fine. Lily would be home, she could let him in. Normal. It was normal. We trusted each other with everything. There wasn't a doubt in my mind that saying yes was the right thing to do. I stayed late at the shop that day, cleaning up the front counter, sorting through shipping manifests, making a list of things to reorder. Kyle left early, and for a while, it was just me and the low hum of the security lights buzzing overhead. By the time I checked the clock, it was already past 7. I grabbed my keys, locked up, and decided to head home. Dylan would have dropped the paperwork off by now. Maybe he was still there, maybe not. Either way, it would be good to see Lily, grab dinner, maybe finish the night with a movie if we weren't too tired. I thought about picking up flowers on the way back. Something stupid and simple, just to make her smile. The drive home felt like every other drive. The same streets. The same streetlights. The same front porch light glowing in the dark. Everything looked the same. Everything felt the same. And I had no idea what was waiting for me behind that door. I pulled into the driveway, the porch light spilling across the front steps just like it always did. Nothing out of place. No sign that anything was different from any other night I'd come home tired and ready for a quiet dinner. I unlocked the front door, stepping inside with my jacket slung over one shoulder, already calling out for Lily. There was no answer. The house wasn't dark, but it wasn't fully lit either, just a few lamps scattered on, like someone had meant to create a cozy atmosphere and forgot halfway through. I dropped my keys on the counter and started toward the living room. Halfway there, I heard something. Not a voice. Not footsteps. A sound that didn't belong, soft, quick, half-swallowed. It came from upstairs. I froze, my hand still on the back of a chair. For a second, I thought maybe Lily had fallen asleep watching TV in the bedroom, the way she sometimes did after a long day. Maybe Dylan was gone already, maybe he dropped off the paperwork and headed home. But something made me move. Some tightening instinct I couldn't name. I walked toward the stairs, every step louder in the thick, too still air. Halfway up, I heard it again, the quiet creak of the bed, the hushed edge of laughter trying too hard to stay hidden. I didn't call out. I didn't ask what was going on. I just kept moving. At the top of the stairs, the door to our bedroom was almost closed. Not latched, just pulled mostly shut, the way we usually did when Ava tried sneaking into the laundry pile during storms. I reached for the handle and pushed. The door swung open. And the world stopped. There they were. Lily, half-dressed, tangled in sheets, her hair a messy halo around her face. Dylan, shirtless, his hands still pressed against her like he couldn't even pretend they weren't caught. It wasn't a kiss goodbye. It wasn't a drunken mistake. It was deliberate. Deep. Intimate in the way only people who thought they were safe could be. For a second, just one, no one moved. They stared at me, frozen, still breathing hard, the flush of what they were doing not even faded yet from their skin. Lily was the first to move, scrambling to pull the sheet tighter around herself, stammering my name like she thought it would somehow make the scene in front of me disappear. Dylan didn't say anything. He just sat there, caught, like a man who knew there wasn't a single excuse in the world that would save him. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stared at them, feeling something cold settle deep into my chest where everything else used to be. All the little moments I hadn't wanted to notice. All the tiny cracks I had smoothed over. They weren't cracks anymore. They were chasms. Everything we'd built, the trust, the friendship, the family, shattered under the weight of what I was looking at. I backed out of the doorway, my hand numb on the knob, my mind refusing to process the scene as anything real. Down the stairs. Out the door. Into the cool night air where it was harder for the lies to cling to me. I didn't know where I was going yet. Only that I couldn't stay. Not with them. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I drove around for hours, watching the town empty itself out, lights blinking off one by one like even the buildings didn't want to witness what had just happened. Somewhere around 2 a.m, I pulled into an empty lot near the waterfront and sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The images wouldn't stop coming. Lily's flushed face. Dylan's hands. The casual, practiced way they touched each other, like it wasn't the first time, not even close. The betrayal wasn't new. It had been living in my house for God knows how long. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Just sat there feeling something burn deeper than anger, something closer to disgust. By the time the sun started climbing over the water, the decision was already made. I wasn't going to be the man who got walked over quietly. I wasn't going to be the fool who pretended it hadn't happened. I went home after sunrise. The house was dark, still pretending it was innocent. I walked straight past Lily, who was curled on the couch looking like she hadn't moved all night. Her face was pale, puffy. She opened her mouth to say something, an apology, a lie, a plea, I don't know, but I didn't give her the chance. I dropped a garbage bag at her feet, her essentials packed in it, wallet, keys, phone, whatever she needed for the immediate future. You're leaving, I said. She stared at me like I had slapped her. Maybe part of her thought there would be a fight. Some long, messy argument where she got to cry and make excuses. She didn't realize I was past that stage. You don't live here anymore, I said, my voice steady. You don't get to live in the life you ruined. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The cold finality in my voice was enough. She started crying then, ugly and messy, her hands shaking as she tried to form sentences that didn't exist. I stood there, arms crossed, watching the woman I thought I'd build a life with dissolve into someone I didn't recognize. When she didn't move fast enough, I opened the door and stood there waiting until she stumbled outside into the morning light, bag clutched against her chest like it could protect her from what she had done. I didn't watch her drive away. I had other things to do. At the shop, Dylan was already there when I arrived. Sitting at the counter, nursing a coffee like it was any other day. He looked up, started to smile, and then froze when he saw my face. I locked the door behind me, flipped the sign to closed. You're out, I said, throwing the paperwork onto the counter between us. Formal removal. Immediate severance. Terms drafted overnight with my lawyer's help, airtight and brutal. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He tried to argue, tried to joke, tried to plead, but none of it mattered. You don't get to profit from a man whose wife you're screwing, I said flatly. You think you're my partner? You're nothing. I made him sign before he could even think to fight it. Made him watch as I cut every tie he thought he had left. By noon, he was gone. By evening, I had full control of the shop, full control of the accounts, and full control of the life I was going to rebuild without either of them. I didn't lose that day. They did. They just didn't know it yet. The silence after it all ended was heavier than I expected. Not the kind of silence that feels empty or sad, the kind that feels earned. Like standing in the wreckage after a storm and realizing you're still there. Still breathing. Lily tried to reach out a few times after I kicked her out. Texts. Calls. Long, rambling voicemails where she cycled through every emotion in the book, crying, pleading, apologizing, blaming. I didn't respond to a single one. I didn't even listen to most of them. After everything, there was nothing left to say. I made sure the locks were changed the same day she left. Made sure the utilities and bank accounts were locked down under my name alone. The house, the business, the life, all protected, all sealed off. The store felt different without Dylan, but not worse. Cleaner. Lighter. I moved his desk into storage, scrubbed his name off every record, every supplier contact, every customer-facing piece of branding. Told anyone who asked that he had moved on to other opportunities, and left it at that. Most didn't care. Some suspected more. No one pressed. A few weeks later, I heard through town that Dylan was struggling. He tried to open his own little repair business out of a rented garage space a few blocks away. It didn't take long for people to figure out something was wrong. Reputation matters in a town like ours. And even if I didn't go around telling the full story, people could read between the lines. They knew he wasn't someone you could trust. Word of mouth dried up whatever work he thought he had lined up. Last I heard, he was 3 months behind on rent and thinking about moving back in with his sister across the state. I didn't lose any sleep over it. As for Lily, she ended up couch surfing with friends for a while. She couldn't afford anything on her own. Her part-time work barely covered groceries, let alone rent. And with her name pulled off every account we shared, she had no safety net left to fall back on. It wasn't about revenge anymore by that point. It was about reality finally catching up to people who thought they could outrun consequences. Meanwhile, I kept moving. The shop stabilized faster than I thought it would. Kyle stepped up big time, covering shifts and learning the ropes fast enough that I started giving him real responsibility. I expanded the online order program Lily had suggested months ago, a bitter irony I couldn't ignore, and it turned into one of our best revenue streams. The house didn't feel haunted. It felt quiet. It felt mine. There were nights where the weight of it all crept back in, when I sat on the porch with a drink and wondered how I hadn't seen it sooner. Wondered how much of our life had been real, and how much had been built on lies too smooth to catch until they shattered. But those nights got fewer as the weeks rolled on. And every morning, when I woke up in a house that no longer carried the smell of betrayal tucked into the corners, I remembered why I made the choices I did. I chose myself. I chose the truth, even when it broke things wide open. And standing there, looking at everything I still had, the business, the house, my own damn future, I knew I hadn't lost anything that was worth keeping. Spring came faster than I expected. The days stretched out longer, the air warming in a way that felt cleaner somehow, like even the weather was trying to scrub away the heavy cold that had hung over everything during the end of it all. I built new routines without even meaning to. Early mornings at the shop before the town woke up. Quiet coffee at the counter, running numbers, making plans for a future that was finally mine again. Weekends spent out on the trails with Ava, the two of us climbing hills we never bothered with before, just because we could. The business grew. Slow, steady, solid. No shortcuts. No partners. Just hard work, reputation, and the kind of loyalty you only earn after you've lost the people you thought you could trust and realized you were better off without them. Some faces faded from my life, people who didn't want to pick sides but did it anyway by staying silent. Others showed up stronger, clearer than ever. Family. A few real friends. Customers who made a point to stop in and support without needing to know the details. Lily never came back around. I knew from a few whispers that she struggled to keep her footing. That the friends who once took her in started drifting when they realized the whole story didn't paint her as the victim she tried to be. That she eventually left town, looking for a fresh start somewhere else. Dylan disappeared not long after. Good. Their absence wasn't a wound anymore. It was a door that had finally slammed shut, leaving nothing behind but lessons I didn't need to relearn. Sometimes at night, sitting out back with a drink in hand and Ava's head resting against my leg, I let myself think about what might have been if they hadn't made the choices they did. If they had stayed honest. If they had loved the life we built as much as they pretended to. But those thoughts didn't sting the way they used to. They passed through like smoke, faint, weightless, already fading before they could land. I didn't need answers from them anymore. I didn't need closure they couldn't give. The truth was simple. I gave them trust, loyalty, love, and they chose to bury it under selfishness. They chose easy moments over lasting bonds. They chose themselves in the worst way possible. And I chose myself too, but in the right way. By building something better when they tried to tear it down. By standing back up when they thought I would stay broken. Not everything you lose is a tragedy. Sometimes it's the best damn thing that ever happens to you. The life I have now isn't the life I planned for. It's better. Because it's real. Because it's earned. Because it's mine. And no one's ever going to take it from me again.